Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Josh McCafferty this morning. We're here to chat through all the latest Celtic news and events, of which there is some, Josh. Things are moving forward. Wilfried Nancy putting together his staff for Celtic, looking like he's on the verge of an imminent announcement, though won't be taking charge until the Dundee game next week. That's the current situation as it stands, Josh. How are you feeling about this Wilfried Nancy thing? It's good to see some kind of movement and kind of all the plans coming together at least.
Yeah, I think, like you say, the main thing is the movement because it's been a good couple of weeks now since something actually substantial has happened, and I think people are maybe getting a wee bit restless. On the whole, as we've been saying the whole time, really, when nothing's been happening, Wilfried Nancy is the man. It's just been taking a
Yeah.
wee bit longer than we maybe expected for it to actually come to fruition. But yeah, I think it's a good thing that his first game is the Dundee game at home on the Wednesday night. I feel like it was a big risk dropping him into St Mirren away, Feyenoord away, and Hibs away. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can conjure up in the Celtic dugout. I've said all along it's a big risk, but I really like him. From what I've heard, I've yet to read a bad word about him, to be honest. And he seems like a guy who's on an upward trajectory, whose next step was going to be Europe. So looks like it's going to be Celtic, and let's see what he can do.
Yeah, so the latest report in on the Celtic Way, if you go to celticway.co.uk from Stephen McGowan, he had a report last night basically indicating what's going on with the current Nancy situation. Now, as Josh alluded to there's been various rumours and rumblings over the last few days that this is all falling apart and all that. We've kind of tried to communicate on this show that that's not what we've been hearing and that actually things have been progressing quietly behind the scenes. Again, that is reinforced with this a more substantial report from Stephen McGowan last night. Now, in that report, it says that Nancy's been kind of putting together his backroom staff in recent days. He's set to bring in two people he works closely with at Columbus Crew, and is moving forward in that regard. But he's also sounding out a former colleague of his who we don't have the name for to report, but a former colleague of his or former colleagues speaking to who also have experience of Scottish football, Josh, which again will be an important aspect of this. Traditionally, when Celtic have appointed something of a so-called outsider to the Celtic post, they have, there has been a more familiar person alongside them. It wasn't the case with Ange Postecoglou, although he did have John Kennedy. But if you think back to Ronnie Deila, even if you go back to Wim Jansen, who had Murdo McLeod, Ronnie Deila had John Collins. This isn't completely abnormal. It's kind of almost the way Celtic do it when they appoint a foreign coach.
Yeah, and Nancy as well is getting his own kind of guys in Kwame Ampadu and the other man whose name escapes me at this moment in time, but he's very
I've got it.
familiar
I've got it. I've got it in the pocket here, Josh. Don't worry.
He's worked with Ampadu for 215 games, but it will be good to get someone familiar with Celtic and Scottish football because I think that's a big requirement on him bringing his own staff. It's the first time that's happened, I think, since Brendan Rodgers' first time around when he brought up Chris Davies with him and a couple of other guys. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the fresh blood in the door. I think that can be good as well for the players. They've been coached by, no disrespect, because John Kennedy is a fantastic
Yeah.
servant to the club, as is, I'm not sure what this all holds for Gavin Strachan either, but it'll be good for the players to get new voices just in training every day on a day-to-day basis, a new day of work, a new way of working. So, looking forward to seeing what those guys can bring to.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a strength that he's bringing in his own guys. I think that's what you want. These fresh ideas, you're bringing him in because he has an established way of working that has been successful at Columbus Crew and at Montreal too. So you don't want to just have him be a fish out of water almost and just be a man on his own in Glasgow. Again, although that worked with Ange Postecoglou. As we know, Ange Postecoglou is almost a unique figure in many respects. So who are the guys that he's planning to bring with him? Well, as Josh alluded to there, Kwame Ampadu is his right-hand man. He's been, as Josh said, he's been with him at Montreal and Columbus Crew. Very much his man. He's English. He was born in England. He represented the Irish under-21s, though. The interesting link here between Ampadu and Celtic is, of course, Paul Tisdale, which is well established. Now, he had a long playing career at Exeter City, but he was also the youth coach at Exeter City when Paul Tisdale was their manager. And that's really, I think, where the intrigue of all these links come from, Josh. Obviously, we don't want to put too much on those and kind of lead to too many narratives, but it seems at least that maybe Paul Tisdale's so aware of Wilfred Nancy because he has this closer relationship with Kwame Ampadu.
Yeah, it certainly would appear so. Ampadu's the under 18s manager, sorry, for 4 years when Tisdale was the first team manager. So they would have worked pretty closely together, I'm sure. And then obviously Ampadu going over to the States, working with Wilfried Nancy. I'm sure Tisdale and Ampadu will have kept in touch and been talking about things. And as one of Stephen McGowan's earlier reports on this whole situation alluded to, it was that Paul Tisdale recommended Wilfried Nancy to the Celtic hierarchy. So this certainly seems like the link between those two is no, I wouldn't say critical in this move, but it's certainly played a part.
Yeah, it certainly has. And the other figure that Nancy's planning to bring to Celtic is Johan Dami, who again is an experienced coach in MLS, has worked obviously closely with him at Columbus Crew as well. Again, something of a right-hand man here who I think will, as I say, bring the complete package of what they have done at Columbus Crew to Celtic. Now, I think at Columbus Crew, Josh, it goes beyond the coaching. They've got a very integrated recruitment model in their staff, and they have a support structure in place that many will argue isn't really in place at Celtic at the moment. Although, as you say there, if Paul Tisdale is invested in this pair, I think again that's a more positive sign. Obviously, you don't know whether it's going to go well or not. I don't think anyone does. No one ever does when a manager is appointed. Nobody knows whether it's going to go wrong or right. But I think at least if there's some sort of alignment there, it's a positive sign that it can be successful. What you don't want is someone being appointed to, as I say, there's no alignment at all. The guy who does recruitment doesn't really believe in the pair. The board don't really believe in the pair, etc. This at least seems there's some sort of joined up thinking here, which alongside Nancy's credentials in general, which I think are quite strong. I know a lot of people kind of turning up their nose that he's only really done this in MLS, but he's been successful and a winner in MLS and celebrated for his style of football and the way he goes about his business. So I think all of that in conjunction, I think Celtic fans can have some sort of hope around this. Now, people will be naturally nervous about it because he's something of an unknown, but I think this could be a good thing, is what I'm saying. I'm not completely down on this appointment. In fact, I think there's many good aspects to it.
Yeah, I feel like the more you learn about Wilfried Nancy, the more you get excited about seeing what he can do. At Celtic, like I said earlier, not heard a bad word said about him. And on the Tisdale thing, we've questioned a lot of his kind of executive power at Celtic and what he can actually do. But the fact seems like he's got a decent, sizable factor behind the appointment of a manager, like you say, is a really good sign. Obviously, Dermot Desmond calls the shots at the end of the day, and he will have did an interview with Nancy at some point, and obviously Nancy's past that. So, yeah, I think he will be just as well. He looks like a leading figure, a uniting figure. He looks like that type of guy, similar to what Postecoglou was when he came in the door. I think the Celtic fans will get right behind him from the off. People will have natural reservations, obviously, but if Nancy wins games early, then he'll get everyone behind his back. I think he has a really good opportunity to do so. He's got the Dundee game at home. He then plays Hearts at home on the Sunday, Roma at home, and then the cup final. So he probably couldn't ask for a better 4 games to get himself started as Celtic manager, and he has a really good opportunity to build momentum early doors and get everyone going.
I think this is probably the most pertinent question around Nancy in the short term. Obviously, there's long-term considerations here. But a comment here from DQ: do you think he will try to install his model right away, or due to load/critical game schedule, he tries to stagger in his style? I think it's almost as I say, it's almost the question surrounding all of this, because the schedule is massively busy, and there's not going to be much opportunity for training. Formation changes in that environment can be tricky and can be difficult, especially if the formation change also involves a change of style. I don't know if there's going to be some sort of reliance on some of the coaches that are there. I'm very confident, even if Sean Maloney moves back to his player pathway development role, that he'll be some sort of continuity voice between and guiding voice on who the players are at Celtic and kind of what they can bring to Nancy. I would expect that kind of thing to happen. But how do you see this, Josh? It's difficult for me, isn't it? I'm like, obviously you want him to come in and just hit the ground running and get everyone moving in a different direction and everything, but the reality of that is that it might not be that easy given the schedule. And actually, we've seen in various other places that can almost be disastrous as well, because although it builds towards a long-term goal, the immediate destabilization creates headlines, it creates drama, and ultimately can harm results on the pitch. And frankly, at the moment, Celtic don't really have a buffer in the league to play with regard to results. Wins need to come on a very regular basis, given the situation with Hearts and even Rangers behind Celtic at the moment.
Yeah, you look at the Dundee game. Celtic play Hibs on the Sunday. The Dundee game's on the Wednesday. So the Monday will probably be a recovery day for the players. Then that would really only give you Tuesday before that Dundee game. Then you only have 3 days after the Dundee game to Hearts. So looking through the schedule here, between now and New Year, Celtic have got 1 free midweek, and that's actually when Christmas is. So they've got on the 21st Aberdeen at home, and then the 27th Livingston away. So that's the longest kind of gap they have between fixtures for a good wee while.
I don't think Nancy will be doing much Christmas shopping that week. I think he'll be pretty busy trying to get Celtic sorted.
Exactly. So he seems like a good football manager. And good football managers will adapt when they need to the circumstances. And I think the circumstances at Celtic at the minute are that they need to win games regardless. It would be interesting if he does switch the whole system to a back three mid-season, mid-title race, when there's a cup final a couple of games away. I just think it wouldn't be a wise football decision. Listen, he might do it, but
might be a genius one as well, Josh. That's
and
the nature of football, isn't it?
I know, because you've seen Celtic do it. I mean, what was it under Neil Lennon just before COVID, when they switched to a 3-5-2 mid-season and it worked. But yeah, I think it would be a monumental risk, and as well, the players and the injuries at the minute, the squad isn't really built for that 3-4-2-1 system, I feel, this moment in time. So I think Nancy will be able to get his principles across in the way he wants football to be played within a 4-3-3 system or a 4-2-3-1 system with slight adaptations here and there. As we know, he puts a lot of onus on the attacking players to use their own kind of imagination and flair in the final third. I wonder if that'll be the case with Celtic, because as we know, the attack is pretty lacklustre. I mean, the only guy you'd really trust to use his own intuition in the final third at the minute is maybe Sebastian Tenecti.
Yeah, and his output as well, Josh. Like,
and his input is pretty poor. So, yes, I'm really intrigued to see how Nancy goes about things in his first couple of games tactically.
Yeah, and I suppose if people aren't aware, people might not be, but I know a lot of people are at this point. But Nancy, prefers to play this kind of, as Josh said, they are a 3-4-2-1, which we've not really seen at Celtic before. But essentially, yeah, it's your three centre backs. But I think he likes to play centre backs quite wide as well in possession, so they'll kind of drift out to the flanks. But the real width in the team comes from the wing backs. There's no outright wingers, so it's that bank with three and then a four with the wing backs pushing very high in possession with essential two midfielders, and then there's kind of two attacking players kind of supporting the central striker, but they're kind of infield a little bit. And what it does, it creates this kind of block across the defensive line of almost a five at times when they're in full flow and got the majority of possession, to really stretch the game from flank to flank. That's really what it's designed to do. Again, how that translates to Scottish football, and I don't imagine Wilfried Nancy will face many deep defensive teams who sit in. How that all translates to this scenario, again, is one of those unknowns that I think has an element of excitement to it. What will happen? How will this go? Yes, it's uncertainty, but I have always said, and I don't want to get too philosophical, but I enjoy the uncertainty in football, Josh. That's really where a lot of the excitement comes sometimes, where you don't really know how it's going to happen. You go into a match, you don't know what you're going to see. I think one of the problems at Celtic over the last couple of years is that everything's just become quite too predictable. You know, even in a Celtic victory, what the pattern of the match is going to be. You know what the tactics are going to be. Everyone just seems a bit fed up with everything at Celtic at the moment. So again, I think these unknowns and this change is a positive thing. Even if it's successful, great. If it's not, of course, Celtic have to recalibrate. But it's like these unknowns are good for me.
Yeah, even when Martin O'Neill came in, it was a bit of unknown. No one really knew how it was going to pan out, if it was going to work. And then suddenly you've got 3 games in a row or 2 games in a row, the Falkirk game and the Rangers game, that were really fun to watch and a refreshing change. So, yeah, Nancy, can he come in? Can he get things going early doors? Almost, touching on the formation, I think it goes into even a 2-3-5 in attack because you get one of the centre halves stepping up into midfield. So it would be something, like you say, that we've never really seen before at Celtic. And I'm really intrigued to see how it pans out against a low block, against a team such as maybe even his first game. Dundee will come to Celtic Park and sit in and frustrate Celtic. So how is he going to combat that? I think as much as we talk about this being an average squad of Celtic players, and it certainly is when you have the injuries at the minute, but there are players in that dressing room who could get a new lease of life under a new manager. People like Benjamin Negrin. I know he's been a decent player this season, but I still feel he has so much more to give. Sebastian Tenecke, Wilfried Nancy is known, and I've read a lot and heard a lot about him doing one-to-one sessions with a lot of different players over at Columbus Crew. I wonder if he'll take maybe Sebastian Tenecke under his wing to get his finishing and end product better. Paulo Bernardo's a guy who's been out in the abyss recently. Can he come back into the side? There's just so many players that you're thinking could get a new lease of life. Even Shinya Yamada, we've seen so little of him. People like Hayato Inamura, could he maybe come in if it's a back three system? I don't know. I really like this new manager this new manager situation because it's exciting, and it's when Brendan Rodgers came back, you kind of knew what you were getting. And then obviously he's been here for 2.5 years. So before that, this really whole kind of uncertainty, excitement of a new manager's methods, I haven't really had that at Celtic since Ange Postecoglou's appointment, and that was 4.5 years ago now almost. So it's really actually enjoyable.
Pete giving us Pelter, he's saying John and Josh trying to convince themselves that Wilfred Nancy is a good choice when most fans had never heard of him before this, if they're honest. Of course I'd never heard of him. I'm not a connoisseur of MLS. I wasn't up on his tactical game and all that. That's and that's besides the point, really. I think what it is I'm not trying to convince myself that it's a good choice. I'm trying to see any of the positives within it. And when Celtic make decisions like this, my first thought is, why are they making the decision? What do they see in this guy that they like? And so I'm trying to figure out what they like in this guy and what they see. Now, obviously people will be cynical about this appointment. I fully accept that, and I understand it with the situation with the board is and how they've conducted themselves over the last 6 months. The board have not really earned the right to be praised for a managerial appointment. What I'm trying to do is see what he's done with Columbus Crew. I have looked closely at them over the last couple of weeks. I have looked at his record and what he's managed to achieve there. Again, as kind of Josh said earlier, you won't find anyone saying a bad thing about Wilfred Non saying the job he's done at Columbus Crew. That's almost a statement of fact. Now, again, I don't know whether that's going to translate to Celtic, Josh. I do not know if this guy's going to be a success. I'm not predicting this guy to go and win the treble now, for example. Again, it's trying to get your head around what Celtic see in this guy. And I think they see attacking football. They see something of an inspirational figure who was transformational at Columbus Crew. I think they see a guy able to develop and improve players. And they see a guy that ultimately won what he needed to win at Columbus Crew, which is all he really could have done there, was win that MLS Cup. So we'll see. I think, who were the other candidates? Should Celtic have gone for a less risky choice? Was Kieran McKenna a choice? There's guys in Europe we talked about Ketil Kutsuna at Bodo Glimt, but there's question marks around any manager that Celtic could appoint here, Josh, and I guess that's my point. So while the board I don't think deserve credit in the bank for Wilfried Nancy, I still like the profile of this guy. I can't lie. If I didn't, I would say that I didn't, but I kind of do.
And all you can do is base your opinions off the evidence, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're looking at the job he's done at Columbus Crew. We're listening to long form interviews with him. I would encourage anyone, if you're maybe a wee bit uncertain about Wilfried Nancy, there are a couple of half an hour, 40-minute long interviews that are available on YouTube. Just go and watch that and listen to him speaking. He's a really impressive guy when he speaks. And like I said earlier, players speaking about him, they love working under him. It seems in his football is really entertaining to watch. The American journalists all believe he's going to succeed in Europe, and they think this is the next step in his journey. So it's really actually hard to find any negatives about Wilfried Nancy, the manager. Okay, maybe managing in America and the US, but you can only really succeed in Europe.
I don't put much stock in that these days. Like football's a changing game, Josh, and guys are coming from all over the world to make an impact in all sorts of different environments. Like, I think you're right. I think there is that skepticism, but I think a skepticism of profile based on where he's been successful, I think it's really unfair these days.
Yeah, it's unfair. And you look at the MLS even itself, it's actually pretty hard to go and win
Yeah.
the MLS Cup like he actually did, just due to the budgets, the salary caps, the playoff system. That's something Nancy himself has berated. So I think he's going to actually enjoy coming to a league that's a wee bit normal. Neil Lennon air quotes that he's probably used to, and looking forward to coming to Celtic.
Yeah, and listen, people will be wondering why we're talking with so much certainty about this guy coming in, but it's our belief that he will be in charge of Celtic within, the next 10 days or so. And I'm expecting an announcement before that. I'm expecting the club to say, this will be Matt O'Neill's last game. I'm expecting all of that in the next few days. So hopefully it transpires in that way, because as I say, you want finality on this. You want a public announcement. You want it to be clear about who's coming in, who staff's going to be, and what Celtic are going to be working with for the next couple of months. I think it's important that he's coming in just before the January transfer window. Now, I'm sceptical whether this can be the transformational transfer window that Celtic need to truly hit the next level, Josh. I think January is just such a tough market in general, and that's not an excuse for the Celtic board, first and foremost. I know that's the excuse, but the reality of the situation is how well equipped are Celtic to now go out and be so aggressive in this January transfer window mid-season against all these kind of competing interests. The only hope around this is like the MLS season. This is a kind of interim period for all these clubs as well. Players are thinking about their future and their moves to Europe. Again, that Wilfried Nancy tapping into that knowledge of MLS, I think, could be big here for Celtic's January window.
Yeah, the season there's just finished,
Yeah.
so it could be a really good opportunity for Celtic to tap into that. Players who have or clubs even who would maybe in the summer window, if you go to the MLS, they're not happy to part with their best players because it's the middle of the season. But now, if you put in a decent offer, they might then part with them. And I think that's something Nancy will look to take advantage of. He will most likely coming into the job, have guarantees from the higher ups at the club that he will be backed. And I think if you look back over the kind of seasons, maybe aside from Brendan Rodgers' first summer window back, the one in 2023, the Celtic backed Ange Postecoglou when they initially came in, and they backed Neil Lennon in the summer transfer window in 2020, just before COVID. So they've got a decent track record for doing it when it sometimes matters, but it's just whether they spend the money correctly. And that's going to be a big part of this in January. So Celtic, we know where the weak points are in the squad. Nancy has just about a month to kind of assess that before the window opens and business starts. And I think I'm intrigued to see who he brings, because Ange Postecoglou had good knowledge of Japan in the J League. He brought in a couple of uncovered gems from there, and I wonder if Nancy could do the same, because in my opinion, the MLS market is very much untapped. Celtic have kind of dipped into it a couple of times. Obviously, they had Manny Perez and Andrew Gutman. It was never really going to work out for those two. It brought Alistair Johnston in, and he's been a real stalwart on the side. He's now one of the key players. He's part of the real leadership group. So, can they dip into that market again and be successful?
McLaughlin P saying, I see people making a fuss about his 49% win record. That's actually quite a good return for a team that doesn't dominate its domestic league. And I made this point yesterday, but just to reinforce this, I challenge anyone who is concerned about Wilfred Nancy's winning percentage record. If you're concerned at all, you do yourself a favour and look at the winning records of every single Celtic manager at their last club before they joined Celtic, and you'll find that their winning percentage record is actually lower since Joseph Venglos, I believe. So that's the situation. Managers who come to Celtic have around about a 50%, just under a 50% winning record. That seems to be the norm for a manager making the jump to Celtic. Obviously, at Celtic, that jumps up given the nature of the league and the resources that we have in comparison to other Scottish teams and the way that Celtic go about their business in Scotland. But the winning record is not a concern for me at all, Josh. It's one of those, I like McLaughlin P's kind of saying here, it's one of those kind of red herring things that looks a bit weird on paper when you consider that most Celtic managers have like close to 70, at least above 60, and you're bringing in a guy who has 49. Again, there's unknowns, but it's not a sign of doom, essentially, with Wilfried Nancy.
Yeah, I'm not particularly bothered about that, to be honest. I mean, I'll look at what he's won, his trophies, his league positions. Okay, not great this season, but yeah, on the whole, not too concerned about that. I mean, I think it's higher than what Brendan Rodgers was before he came, what Ronnie Dylas was, what Postecoglou's was. So you just need to do a bit of comparison work if people are berating him for his win percentage.
Yeah, and I don't want to feel like I'm lecturing people too much, but it's one of those things where you see a lot of
Yeah,
negativity around appointments like, and I understand the cynicism. As I say, I'm not a defender of the board in any way or shape or form. I think they've acted pretty appallingly over the last few months, specifically some of the statements that they've put out and some of the accusations they've made. But that it's a separate issue to what's coming in minority now. Is it a separate issue in the sense what are Celtic actually fixing here? As someone said in the chat there, in a best case scenario, Nancy's probably here for about 3 years maximum. What are Celtic do to plan for the long term? This kind of it's not realistic to expect this guy to be here at Celtic for the next decade. So, like, what are Celtic putting in place around Wilfried Nancy? That's going to be very crucial over, I think, the coming months about who are Celtic appointing into backroom roles, what kind of investment are they making into the football department beyond the manager, and that goes for all the departments that support the team. I even include the medical department, I include the kind of analysis department, I include the scouting department. For Celtic's long-term future and long-term ambitions, that's actually going to be more important than bringing in this manager. That's it.
yeah, because the last thing you want is for kind of Wilfred Nancy to come in. It's his own guys in every single department at the football club, and then suddenly he gets whisked away to the English Premier League within a year and a half because he's won a treble or two trebles or something like that. And then suddenly Celtic are left in a really bad position where they're going to have to start from the bottom again, essentially. And that's what you don't want. You want when a manager leaves, you already have the people in place, you have the systems, the processes in place that it's a seamless transition to the next manager. There's no significant overhaul of these several departments. So that's what they need to be doing now. Do I have confidence in the board and the club to do that? Probably not. So that's what it is at the minute.
And another question. So people asking, are we going to bring in the director of football? Is this appointment? Is this evidence that Paul Tisdale is actually the de facto director of football? His job role as head of football operations at Celtic. We've not really had a sense that he's been trusted with any kind of authority at Celtic. But if he's the man who's recommended Nancy to Celtic and they're proceeding with this, does that make him Celtic's, what you would consider a director of football or a sporting director? I think to be like a genuine sporting director
Yeah.
in the way that European clubs use them, they are essentially given a budget and told to like go and build a football department. I don't think Paul Tisdale's been given that. I think there are these checks and balances in place, but it seems at least that Celtic are investing some sort of trust in Paul Tisdale. Now, I know there's scepticism around that, but Celtic are doing it, so whether it works out or not, we don't know, but it's interesting that they are kind of pursuing Paul Tisdale's choice for manager.
Yeah, they have. They've taken his recommendation on, and it seems like it's gone to Dermot Desmond, and then he's just decided, right, I like this guy, maybe I don't like this guy, whatever. So, I mean, you could, on one hand, yeah, say that it's Paul Tisdale's recommendation, but on the other hand, you could say that Dermot Desmond's going to call the shots at the end of the day over who the next manager is going to be. I'm really intrigued to see. I very much doubt it, to be honest, but if Paul Tisdale gets put up for media, when Wilfried Nancy is unveiled, the elusive Paul Tisdale, I very much doubt it. And I wonder who's going to be alongside Wilfried Nancy in his first press conference because Celtic over the years have usually had the assistant alongside Martin O'Neill, obviously had Maloney when he was unveiled. And I think Neil Lennon had John Kennedy alongside him when he came back. Brendan Rodgers, obviously, second time around, didn't have anyone. He had Peter Lawwell and Michael Nicholson alongside him, but I mean, I doubt they'll be in a press conference with Wilfried Nancy when he's unveiled, but intrigued to see how that goes.
What's your gut feeling on the Sean Maloney thing? Now I know your
Yeah.
kind of information was there was an expectation within the academy that he would be moving back to his role as player pathway
Yeah.
manager. But do you see him like just your opinion, your gut feeling? Do you see him continuing in a role with the first team?
I would like him to continue in a role with the first team, and I think he deserves the opportunity. I think he's made a really good impact, an unseen impact under Martin O'Neill's interim reign. You've seen him in the Rangers game in the derby. He was barking out instructions on the touchline, and he led the team talk, some of the team talks in extra time. My gut feeling is, to be honest, I think if Wilfried Nancy wants him as part of his backroom team, then I think he could be part of the backroom team. But if not, then he'll still be at the club in some capacity. We know obviously that director of football role or head of football operations role is Paul Tisdale's, but I think Maloney would be suited to a role like that, to be honest, within the club because he now has that experience of working very closely on a day-to-day basis with the squad, and obviously he knows the club, everything about it. But yeah, my gut feeling is I would like him to be. I mean, no disrespect because obviously I follow the youth stuff and everything.
Yeah.
I have a special place for the youth academy, but I feel like he deserves to be in a greater role at the football club than player pathway manager.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I agree with you. I think it'd be sensible, I think, to have Sean Maloney as part of some sort of wider team around Nancy here that directly impacts the first team beyond the youth stuff. Brian Morier making the point, when it comes to selecting new managers, Celtic have got it right more or less since Martin O'Neill. All of them have been successful. All of them have delivered trophies. Now, as people who watch the show regularly will know, I've been very critical of Dermot Desmond over the last few weeks and months. You know, I've not kind of held back, but along the way, I have said that his eye for a manager is actually quite impressive. When someone gets in a room and manages to convince Dermot Desmond that they are the man to take Celtic forward, generally he's Dermot Desmond's gut feeling on managers has actually been pretty strong over the last couple of decades. And yeah, I agree. Like, that is one of Dermot Desmond's strengths, is selecting who's going to be the Celtic manager. So that's actually some sort of small crumb of comfort throughout all of this stuff around the board and the Desmonds and the kind of chaos that they're bringing to Celtic at the moment. That stability of manager selection, I think the track record speaks for itself, Josh.
Yeah, it's the one silver lining, isn't it? Dermot Desmond, I think he goes with his gut feelings on a lot of these appointments when he speaks to managers. I believe it's well documented that he had a 25-30 minute Zoom call with Ange Postecoglou, and a day later Ange was on a plane to Glasgow. So you're just hoping that gut feeling serves him well with the appointment of Wilfried Nancy. Just need to wait and see. I just realised there I've gone from Nancy to Nancy through this video, but
yeah.
it's one of them.
I've gone from Nancy to Nancy, yeah, quite consistently over the last couple of days, so don't worry about it. Right, so I guess we'll see. I mean, the reporting from multiple outlets, not just ourselves, is that this is close to being announced in some form. I don't know when that will quite be. Obviously, Martin O'Neill and the team travel to Rotterdam tomorrow, and they will take charge of that Europa League game. Again, it's almost like when you're going into a new era, this kind of limbo period, you're like, well, how much does it matter? But the results are needed. If Celtic do want to stay alive in the Europa League, which I have my doubts about they're capable of doing, but if they do, then they'll need some sort of result against Feyenoord. And then that Hibs game, again, it could be like Martin Neal's last game. It's likely to be his last game, but the 3 points are what there's no emotion or sentiment involved there. 3 points against Hibs, that's what's needed with the state of the table at the moment.
Yeah, it's a huge game. Hibs are obviously in decent form. They're pushing up the table. Celtic have a pretty poor record at Easter Road in recent history in the past sort of 10 years. So they need to go there. They need to win the game, regardless of what happens on Thursday night. Just get the 3 points in Leith on Sunday, and that sets it up very well for Wilfried Nancy. In terms of the game on Thursday night, actually, looking at Feyenoord's recent results, I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah,
they've lost four out of the last 5, conceded 4 goals at home at the weekend, but I'll leave that for the guys in the next couple of days. We're talking about Feyenoord.
There's a wild debate about Rio Tate forming in the live chat, of which he seems to be the kind of lightning rod for everything on the pitch at the moment. I'm not going to sit here and defend Rio Tate. I think he's had a poor season. What's kind of your take on the Hatate thing, Josh? We were kind of taking pelters yesterday for suggesting that he has good and bad games. Everyone just going, well, he doesn't have any good games. What are you talking about? I understand that point to an extent. Again, I'm not really defending him. I think he's had a really poor season, but where you landing on the Hatate thing?
I can think of one good game from Rio Hatate this season, and that was Kilmarnock at home a couple of weeks ago, just before the international break. He's a very inconsistent player. On his day, he's one of the best footballers in Scotland. But I think at 27 years of age, I think that's what it is, 26, 27, it probably shows his level that he's still playing for Celtic at that age. And he's been at the club for just about over 3 years now that he's not got to move elsewhere. So, yeah, that's my take on him.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, is he one of the names you're expecting that could be part of this upheaval in January? I think we're all expecting Daiza Maeda to be on the first plane out of Glasgow. Is Rio Hatate another you would kind of consider that a potential exit this January?
I'm not sure. I don't know what clubs would take a look at him. You know, you think about Rio Hatate, I can't really think of any significant kind of transfer links of clubs tracking him or looking at him over the past couple of years. I mean, because his performance levels just haven't been there recently, I just wonder if teams are actually going to look at him that would give Celtic the money they want for a player like that. He could be one that gets rejuvenated under Wilfried Nancy, because we've seen the levels he can hit before in a Celtic jersey domestically when he came in, he set it alight. And Ange Postecoglou's second season, he was incredible. So yeah, he struggles with the inconsistency. If he can become more consistent, then I think he can be a key player in this Celtic side. And seemingly when he plays well, Celtic play well, but he's struggled to hit the levels recently.
And Josh, you said this earlier, but here's the full run of fixtures between
Mm-hmm.
potentially Nancy's first game and January, the start of January. Celtic versus Dundee at Celtic Park. Celtic versus Hearts. Celtic versus Roma. Celtic versus St Mirren. Dundee United versus Celtic at Tannadice, Celtic versus Aberdeen at Celtic Park, away to Livingston, which is, can have its own challenges, away to Motherwell, who are playing some nice football this year, then at home to Rangers on Saturday, the 3rd of January, with a 12:30 kick-off. That's for an opening 9 fixtures. That is fairly box office. I
it's
don't
good.
often like to use the phrase box office, but it's a run of fixtures that is going to tell us a lot about both Wilfried Nancy's his credentials as a manager, but also where Celtic season is ultimately going to go.
Yeah, well, you've got obviously the cup final, which is a massive game in itself.
Yeah.
And you've got sort of run of the mill league games at home against likes of Dundee, even Aberdeen. Although I know they beat Hearts at the weekend, but they've not been great this season. Then Hearts, a top of the table clash in his second game, is huge. He's got a derby against Rangers. It's going to be a really exciting start for Wilfried Nancy. And listen, if he can, as I keep saying, if he can get the results early, then he'll get everyone behind him. Just so engrossed to see how he does. Can't wait.
And the Hatate debate rages on. We're going to wrap things up here. Yeah, you can talk about Ray Hatate in the comments if you like below. I've no problem with that at all. Thanks to everyone joining us in the live chat today. I really appreciate all your comments and giving us some good talking points to discuss. Appreciate your presence as well, Josh. Thanks for joining us. As I say, we've got more coverage coming up on the YouTube channel and celticway.co.uk. At the moment, we're running this offer. It's £12 for a year, it's £1 for 6 months. It's a fantastic subscription offer. You get access to all our exclusive features, exclusive news, interviews, etc., of which there'll be a lot coming up over this kind of new Celtic era, analysis and tactics too, if that's your kind of thing. Even outside of all that, I think it's a good enough deal in itself, but you get this free Shunsuke Nakamura print made by Frankie. It's an A3 print, it goes on your wall, it's high quality, it's proper good stuff. So if you fancy getting that ahead of Christmas, then please consider taking part in our subscription sale. I'm going to stick the link in the live chat for everyone to get, and I'll also put the links below and in the description and in the comments for everyone to subscribe. As I say, Josh, £1 for 6 months or £12 for 12 months, which is at £1 a month. That's a good deal for a print of this quality, never mind what everything else you get for the Celtic way.
Yeah, it's cracking. Obviously, you get the print, which is beautiful in itself. Would make maybe even a wee perfect Christmas present for someone. If my dad's listening, there you go. In terms of the Celtic way, the content is just next to none, really, in terms of Celtic coverage in depth, like you say, whether it's tactical stuff, whether it's big interviews with Celtic greats of the past, or whether it's full coverage of press conferences before and after every single game. I struggle to think of anyone who's covering Celtic as in depth and as to a level as we are at the minute. So, certainly I would encourage anyone to take up the offer.
Yeah, and people watch this every day. If you watch this every day, this is a massive support for the YouTube channel as well. It's not just the website. It supports us and what we do and how our jobs and how we go about our business and the way we like to cover Celtic, which is reasonable and balanced and level-headed. And to a large extent, that's because we're able to do that, not just because we want to, but because we're able to, because we're supported by our subscribers. We've got a lot of subscribers to the website who underpin everything we do, and we generally can't do it without them. So if you would like to be that supportive to us, as I say, at £1 for 6 months or £12 for 12 months, would really appreciate it, and you get all of this in return. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm not quite sure who's going to be on the morning show, but we'll definitely have a morning show. We'll have lots more to talk about. We've got the weekly pod with Hamish as well. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining me, Josh. We'll see you again next time on the Celtic Way.